if God is calling you, and they believe that this was definitely God calling Dan to do this work. If God is calling you, you don't stop. You go, because He'll take you through whatever you have to go through.
Last episode, Sister D shared about how God directed her family to move to the San Carlos Apache reservation in the very early 60s to establish the Church of Jesus Christ. Today she picks up as they begin the cross-country trek to Arizona.
We were told, people said, "Oh, you're crazy moving to Arizona. Why would you want to move to Arizona? It's desert, it's this, it's hot, it's, everything that was wrong with Arizona, they were trying to tell us, And there's no work out there. You're gonna starve. Your children are gonna starve because you won't find a job." Well, when we moved, we were really just kids, we didn't know that you couldn't move on the reservation. We hadn't looked into that part. We just moved. Here we are with this. We sold our Cadillac, and the first one he sold a long time ago, but the second one, we had a Cadillac. We sold it and got a Nash Rambler. Well, nobody knows what a Nash Rambler is because they don't have them anymore, but it was a tiny little station wagon. And
with 3 babies.
With 3 babies, yeah. And everything that we owned was in this little trailer in the back, and we pulled into the reservation and come here, and then we find out, okay, well, you can't move here. You've got to have permission to move on the reservation. You've got to go to the tribal meetings and tell them why you're coming here, and you can't just live here. So here we are, here on the reservation, and we can't live here.
At any point, were you upset at Brother Dan? Because you have 3 children, you've moved places. No,
I didn't.
Wow.
I knew.
I'm sorry, Josh.
Well, I knew God called him. I knew it was his calling. And I knew if I stood in his way, God could take me out. Yeah. I wanted to be a part of whatever he was going to be a part of. And I didn't want to stand in the way of him serving God. And he blessed me with 3 children when I wasn't supposed to have any. And so we had our normal sicknesses and our normal heartaches and things that everybody goes through. We had all the normal stuff, but God always took care of it. He always brought us through whatever it was that we had to go through. So we left here. We went to Globe. We thought we'd find a place in Globe. Well, Globe happened to be a ghost town at that time because the mines weren't working. And there was nothing. There was no place. There was nothing. So we went on. We ended up in Mesa at a motel. And we're driving down the street. And here's this big arrow that comes down, and it was flashing, And he says, "I think I'll try this place." So we pulled in that motel. They had one room left, and it was a little room with the kitchenette. So Dan says, "Well, is there a place that I can park the trailer?" So he says, "Yeah." He says, "This room is right at the end of the line of rooms that they had. This one was right at the end, and it was a little kitchenette, and there was he had like an arbor. No, you don't call it an arbor. He had like roses on this fence. What do you call them?
Like a trellis thing?
The trellis,
okay.
Yeah. There was this big trellis there with the roses, and then there was this piece of ground right beside it that we could park the trailer, and it was big enough that we could put the playpen or whatever to put the babies in there. It was real nice, and the trellis kind of shaded that area, and it was nice. So we said, okay, we don't know how long we're going to be here. So we said, okay, and we'll do you by the week, however you want to do it. So that's what we did. We stayed there. So okay, we ended up there, on Wednesday, and we unpacked what we needed to unpack and settled ourselves in the room with the babies, because we had to make sure that they were taken care of. And Dan says, Monday morning, first thing, I'll go look for work. Well, now the last word that we had heard, you're not going to find a job in Arizona. There's no work in Arizona. You're going to be hungry. So he went to Motorola, and before, Dan was a draftsman, was a job that he had had when we first got married, and he had all these blueprints that he had worked on. And he had one big roll that was a machine that he had designed for the company. He took that and his other blueprints with him, and he went to Motorola to apply for a job, a drafting job, which they were hiring draftsmen at that time. So now this is Monday morning. His word when he left, he says, "Okay, honey, pray for me. I'll be home at noon. I'll look for work this morning. I'll be home at noon, and then this afternoon we'll go out and look for a house." I said, "Okay." So I'm waiting for him to come home, and I get a phone call from him. He says, "Honey, I got a job, but they want me to start right now. So I won't be home until dinner time." Well, dinner time, it was already starting to get dark, so it's too late to go look for a house, you know. So I thought, oh well, no house tonight. So I'm in a motel room with 3 babies, you know. So he said when he went in there, they looked at his blueprints and they said to him, "Mr. Pachuto, I'm sorry, we can't hire you as a draftsman, but we can hire you as a technical illustrator," which was a better job, better pay. So God not only provided a job for him, he provided a better paying job than what, you know, and at that point we would have taken any job, you know. So God rewards you in different ways. You know, we had, instead of worrying about how we're going to do, we just trust God and know that you might get to the very end before he comes through, but he'll come through.
It's making me think of that Song of Zion. What's the one? If you would labor in Zion, what number is that? 102? Mm-hmm. And the line in the chorus, "Brother, step out on faith now. Sister, Jesus will see that." It's like you don't get to see those blessings of God in your life until you take the leap of faith. Mm-hmm. So you guys took this leap, but then each step of the way, it's like, look at this miracle. Look how God came through. And it says in the next line, he has fish on the fire, and he's waiting for you. So it's God's like, I have what you need. But you had to take that step of faith. That just hit me as you were talking about it. Yeah.
And to me, it's like, it's not always handed to you right now. You say, I want it. I want to do this. But you don't get it right now. You got to prove that you want it. Mm-hmm. You know, you prove, you stick with it. You don't give up in between.
Right, that's stepping out.
Yeah. So here we are in Mesa now, and living in a motel, a room with a little kitchenette, and he's working every day. And
now you're 2 hours away from your promised location, right?
Yeah, about 2 hour drive. Yeah, and well, back then too, it was just a 2-lane highway all the way through. So, you know, there was nothing between here and there was Little Globe, Little Miami that were ghost towns, and then when you started up the mountains, there was nothing. You know, you got clearer into Mesa.
How did you get a house then? Because you talked about how that job was provided.
Dan put a notice on the bulletin board at work that he needed either to rent or to buy a 3-bedroom home, if you know of any that were available, because they weren't renting because it was winter and all the snowbirds were out here, and they were mostly older people that were sick, and they didn't want children around, so we couldn't find a place that would take children. Mm-hmm. So he finally put a notice on the bulletin board. And one of the ladies from the office came back to him, and she says, my brother sells and rents He's in real estate, and he specializes in taking care of the ones that come out in the winter. And so we made an appointment to meet him. And so after work, we went over to Scottsdale and to his house. We pulled in the front. He come out. He laid his book on the hood of the car. I'm in the car with the 3 little boys. And while he's talking to him about a house, the guy across the street puts a for sale sign out in the yard. And he said, how about, Dan says, well, what about that house? And he says, well, these are model homes here. He says, it's a pretty nice home. He says, go look at it and see what you want. Now, ladies, get over that. So he went and looked at the house, and he said, perfect. That's perfect. He came back on. He says, that's perfect. Told the guy. He says, how soon can you move? And the gentleman said, he says, well, my wife is sick. She wants to go back to California where our kids are, because she's really sick and she's not going to live much longer, and she wants to be over there, so we're in a hurry to get out of the house. And Dan says, okay, I'll meet you at the bank Monday. This was like Friday. You know, I can meet you at the bank Monday, and we'll close the deal. Wow. And the following weekend you can move out. So we had, so that week we closed that deal, and then getting ready to move over there, I had to get the water hooked in our name, and the electric in our name, and the gas in our name, and get everything, the mail and everything going in our name. We bought that and we moved. We lived in the motel for 1 month exactly.
Wow.
And the first Sunday in January, I think the first was like right at New Year's, so the first Sunday in January of 1961, we had church in our living room in that house.
Wow.
And it had the front of the house was the dining room and living room. We had, during that time, we had bought, from when we purchased the house, we had bought all of our furniture and everything, and they had all the furniture that we needed for the bedrooms, the family room, and the kitchen, but they didn't have the living room and dining room that I wanted. So, because we had saved, we had our money, we had the money, the $10,000 was for the church, and then the money that we got from the furniture was to replace our furniture when we got here.
So you kept your promise with the $10,000.
Yes. Yeah. That first little building was put together with that $10,000. Yeah.
So you had mentioned about, you knew God had called you to here on the reservation, but you couldn't come here because you weren't tribal.
Right.
So how did you get permission to move here?
Dan found out that the first Tuesday of every month was when the tribe had their meeting. So he came up. He came here all the time, and he established himself. He met people. Even though we had church in our living room down there, he would leave after we had service and come up here, and he would gather a few of them together and meet down by the river, and they'd have a little service down by the river. And so that's how he got established. And then he went to the meeting, the tribal meeting, the first Tuesday meeting that he went was he didn't have his credentials with him. They liked what he was presenting, but they wanted to be sure that he was an ordained minister, because it had a lot of people that had moved in and weren't what they said they were, and took advantage of the natives, and they were being very cautious now about who they were letting in. So he says, well, I can bring it. Well, back then the minister's license was big. It was about like that. Well, you couldn't carry it in your wallet, and it didn't fit in your pocket either, so they didn't carry it around. And so the next Tuesday, he was scheduled for the meeting on the next Tuesday, next month now. So he starts to bring his supposed to bring his credential with him to show that he was a minister. So he's halfway here when he realizes that he didn't take out his license. So he pulled over and prayed. He says, God, you're my license. If you want me there, you need to make a way for me. If I go back and get the license, I'm going to miss the meeting.
Right.
And
because it's like a 2-hour drive. So
then they'll throw it out. They'll throw that out. So I need to be there, and you need to be my license. And so he came on. And when he got there and to present himself, Sister Mary Ross, she wasn't a sister then, but he had prayed for her mother when her mother was sick, lived in a...
So he was just like in the area and had prayed for her.
Mm-hmm. She lived down the road from here, and he had visited around. He made his acquaintance with the people around, and he would gather at the river and have meetings with them.
Oh, that was while you're still living in Phoenix?
Yeah, we were still living down there, and so one of the ladies told him that this lady was sick and needed prayer. Would he go pray for her? So he prayed for her mother, and her mother got well. Well, Sister Mary's there, and she gets out. And if you had met her here when she was testifying, she'd get out in the aisle and testify. She paced like a minister. She'd pace back and forth while she's testifying. So that's what she did at the tribal meeting. She got out, she stood out in the aisle, and she testified about him being a minister and helping her. And this was a kind of a minister that we needed on the reservation. And she went on, and when she finished, they said, "Okay, go pick your piece of ground, what you want to have your meeting." So him and Brother Ether Fernier was here at that time, and they went around.
They were both living in Phoenix?
Yeah, we were all living in Phoenix.
Okay, so
well, at that time they had conference in California in March, and when Dan went over for the conference in March in San Fernando Valley, then it was San Fernando Valley, he went. The conference was there, and he went to that conference, and he took 2 of the native people with him. And when he was telling about the mission and how things were going over here, Brother Jim Lavavo spoke in the Spirit that this was true at work and that the help was needed. And Brother Ether, Brother Bob Shiraki, and Brother Phil Damore were all ordained ministers at that conference to come here and help. So they came over, and they moved. They had to settle their own. They had to leave their jobs and settle what they had to sell their houses and do that. So they couldn't come immediately, but as soon as they could come, they all came over. And
I was going to ask about, actually, because you mentioned going and visiting different people. I was curious about what that looked like when you were coming here and there's no Church of Jesus Christ presence at all.
Yeah.
How do you initiate? How do you meet a person and have a conversation and get to where you mentioned meeting at the river, you mentioned visiting people in their homes? How does that start?
That was Dan. He'd had, one of the sisters said, when she watched him, he put the Bible and Book of Mormon under his arm, knocked on the door, and before you know it, he was inside. And 9 times out of 10, they came to church.
Wow.
So
you just went door to door?
Yeah, he wherever, and there wasn't too many doors here at that time. There was a lot of, they didn't have houses. A lot of them didn't have. There was very few houses. They lived in like wickiups and these grass shades and stuff. They were very poor people, and so there was a lot of openings. We had a sister from California that sent day-old bread out, and every week he'd take bread around, and that's how he met some of the people. Would give him bread. Sister Anita Hopkins. He stopped at the yard. She was washing clothes on a washboard out in the yard, and a whole bunch of kids running around. So he stopped and he said, here's the bread. I'll give you this bread with your children. It'll be gone tomorrow. Mm-hmm. But if you come to church and learn of the bread of life, that you'll never hunger or thirst again. And she came, and she was a faithful member. She had to come to see what that bread of life was, and a faithful member. And the old sisters, they were just, when they took hold of the gospel, they really took hold of it. It was really, really wonderful.
As a follow-up to what you just said, now you mentioned Anita Hopkins. Is this Josiah and Elijah Hawkins?
And this is Hopkins.
Is that
Hopkins.
Hopkins. Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
I'm trying to make connections.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
You're fine. You don't have. I probably won't have it. But
yeah, well, I don't know. Have you been to Pine Top? You've been to Pine Top? Did you, Joyce?
Oh, yeah. Jerry Hopkins, Naomi,
Joyce,
and Joyce
Cheney.
Yes.
Yeah, they always testify.
Yeah.
So
Sister Naomi was a miracle baby.
Wow. So you knew them as babies?
Yeah, she was. I'm old.
Sorry.
So that little girl that sang last week, is that who you're referring to?
No, they're like adults. These are like adult women who bring their grandkids and stuff.
Yeah, the grandchild, the girl grandkid. Last weekend when we were there, remember? She sang with her aunt or her mom or grandma or something. Because they said they were from here.
Yeah, I believe that might have been
Amaya.
I think it might have been Sister Naomi who was singing.
Okay. And she has a granddaughter or a niece?
I don't know how they're all related.
She has a niece that she's raised.
That's like 13 or something? 12, 13?
Yeah.
Okay.
Amaya. Sister Joyce is the older sister. She usually has a powerful testimony.
Yeah, she gets up and she's like exhorting you got to come to church.
Yeah. And
she sits up front, right?
Yeah, in the front row.
That's exactly who I'm thinking about. Yeah.
Okay, Sister Naomi is the younger one. It goes.
Yeah, last week in Pine Top, Amaya was testifying about how grateful she is that, I guess Naomi's her aunt or whatever, is bringing her to church. And I didn't realize that she's coming because Brother Dan shared the gospel with her mother all those years ago. So that's cool. Yeah.
Yeah, it snowballs. And talking about that, I don't know if we're still on or not, but talking about that, it's the brothers were doing missionary work and they went to Minnesota and on a reservation there, and they're trying to get their foot in the door where they weren't supposed to be able to get in. And they met this lady there, which she's ministering because her husband was a minister there and he passed away, so she's holding the place together there. They met her, and because they were from Arizona, from the Church of Jesus Christ, she says, do you have a church in Arizona or something? And somehow they got connected, and she says, oh yeah, Brother Dan baptized me at the church in San Carlos. So through, so then they were allowed to come to her place, and they're allowed to visit on that reservation because Dan baptized her.
It's such a legacy. I'm just thinking about all the places that this work has impacted. Because even you mentioned in his earlier life, building all those branches, many of them are still used today, and all these people were now generations later, they're still people are brought to Christ or introduced to Christ because of these generational legacies. That's really cool.
Yeah.
I had another. I was reading the history book recently, and it mentioned a sister, Lillian Quesada. Because it mentioned this dream that she had that I thought was really neat. It would be all right if I share it?
Sure.
It says, shortly after I was baptized on October 1st, 1961, so that's around this time, I dreamed I was in our church building in San Carlos. There were just a few of us in the building. In front of the pulpit, lying in a casket, was the body of an Indian lad. That's the term it uses. On the rostrum were elders from different places. I recognized some from California. Outside the church, there was a large number of people from other churches on the reserve. A voice kept telling me to go up to the casket and give gold plates to the boy. I did not go up at first, but the voice kept telling me to give gold plates to the dead boy. Finally, I gathered enough strength and to begin walking up to the aisle towards the casket. A figure I did not recognize put the gold plates into my hands as I walked up the aisle. I thought the dead boy looked like my nephew as I approached him. I placed the gold plates into his hands, and immediately the boy came to life. His face became beautifully illuminated. I no longer recognized him as I looked on his shining face. He began waving the gold plates in front of him. Then the Indian boy spoke. These plates are a record of our people, and this is the true Church of Jesus Christ. All of a sudden, the people that were standing outside began to come into the church and quickly filled up the building. As they came in, they kept saying, now we know that the Book of Mormon is a record of our people. Now we know this is the true church. That was had by a sister, Lillian Quesada, when she was an Apache sister from this area.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. She was one of the first part, that came. Sister Nash. We've got Sister Nash's grandson and great grandchildren are still here. Sister Lily also had a dream where, when she questioned the Book of Mormon, she had a dream where the angel was there and he was flipping the pages through the Book of Mormon and saying, "It is good, it is good, it is good." That was before she was baptized. And then when, and she says, yeah, because that was her question, the Book of Mormon.
Well, that it confirms the message of the Book of Mormon, which is a record of the indigenous people of the Americas, and there's a lot of prophecies that when the day comes when they will accept these records, that God has a lot of great blessings. And I can put some links for people who are interested in more about that. I can put a link to some other videos with more information about that.
Yeah.
But I just thought was a really neat about how this young boy comes to life, and even in the book of Ezekiel in the 37th chapter, how there's the valley of dry bones, and when the Lord speaks, all these bones come together and have life again, and it talks about the records coming together, and it someone might look at, you were describing this place when you got here, it wasn't a wealthy place, people didn't have a lot, it's in the middle of the desert, wasn't by anything, but when God looks, he doesn't look at things the way humans do. He sees this potential and he has this power to breathe life into things, and it's like a blessing that he gives us an opportunity, if we choose to be a part of his plan and to be used by him. Yeah. So I just thought it was a neat experience to share.
Yeah. They also, one day there was a trailer that got a flat tire, and it was being moved down the road, and it got a flat tire, and they pulled off in our parking lot. So I saw the gentlemen out there. There was 3 or 4 of them out there working on the thing, and the one man was sitting on the bench that we had between the trees out there. And so I grabbed some water and went out and asked them if they would like water. And I said to the gentleman that was sitting there, I says, "I don't know if you remember me, because now I've got white hair." And
this is just recently?
Yeah, this was just recently. I says, I have white hair, but he says, "Oh yeah, I remember you." He says, "You're Brother Dan's wife." He says, yeah, he says, "Yeah, I remember. I went to school with Mark," he said. "I remember going to school with Mark." He says, "Yeah," he says, "I was really, really sad to hear when Brother Dan passed away." He says, "because he really helped a lot of people." And he says, "I remember when he used to bring bread to our house."
Wow.
So he says, even when we weren't home, we knew once a week we were going to get bread from Brother Dan. And he says, even when we weren't home, we'd go home, and on that Tuesday there would be bread on our bed. He would put it in the window. He would put the bread, because there was a lot of kids. That's where he would stop. Where they had a lot of kids, he would stop and make sure that they had the bread that he was sent. So, even, I says, we might not have a big group, but they've been touched. And when God's ready to move them, they'll come.
Well, and even in the Book of Mormon, in the 3rd chapter of 2nd Nephi, it talks about that we're looking forward to a choice seer from among the indigenous people who will be the one to convince the people of the Americas of the record, the Book of Mormon, but the word will have already gone forth among them. And so it's our role to just plant the seeds, to just do what's God calling me to do, and I'm not worried about measuring success by what I see, but by, am I being obedient to what God's given me to do?
Yeah.
And to follow up with that, you asked the question earlier, what is it, like, how does someone start the work? How do you build this courage to go out and do this work? And you described that, Brother Dan went, and his desire was to make sure that the people didn't go hungry, to give them bread. And just like the same thing, where when you saw that the men were thirsty, you went and you helped them. Mm-hmm. And to me, it's not so much, preaching's great, right? But it's our actions that show others the love of Christ. And so, to me, it's amazing that the same spirit that your husband carried all those years ago, you carried in that water when you handed him, and he remembered the exact same feeling he probably felt when he got the bread as a kid.
Yeah. And the same, during COVID, the reservation was shut down. You weren't, nobody was allowed in. And they had to know who you were in order to get back in. Like we could go up to Bash's and get groceries, or we could go get our mail. But there were patrol at the road there. When you come down, you had to stop and be approved to come in. Otherwise, you couldn't get in. And so I asked to be able to be relieved for Thanksgiving, because David was living in California at that time, and he was coming to visit their daughter in Queen Creek. And Matt said, I'll come for Thanksgiving if you can leave the reservation. So I said, well, let me find out what I can do. So they had a group here that was called Turk, which was tribal emergency, something rather, that helped the people that were having trouble during COVID. So I called, and there was this young man, Kevin Capsador, that was new. He had just started this, got his position in this committee, and I talked to him, and I said I would like to go to Queen Creek and visit my granddaughter. My 2 sons are going to be there for Thanksgiving, and I would like to get permission to leave to go there. And he says, yeah, he says, I remember, he says, well, you didn't get permission. I says, no, we've been locked down here. My sons can't come out or nothing. He says, your sons can't come out here? He says, they didn't allow your sons? He says, your church is an essential part of this tribe. He says, and essential things were supposed to be approved. He says, so they should have been approved to be able to come out here to help you. He says, besides that, you're an elder, senior citizen. You're an elder, and we're supposed to be taking care of our elders. So they should have allowed your kids to come here and help you with whatever I needed to have help with for the mission. I says, oh, where were you at the beginning of this? And wow. So I got to go, but they also told Dan when he was first trying to get out here, and they says, you won't last 3 years. Nobody lasts more than 3 years. And so,
at 60. That's 63 years. So I have like these kind of memories of some experiences of like fire on the property. Mm-hmm. Can you remind me? And there's also one about a cloud when they were building the roof or something. Can you remind me of some of these experiences I've heard about but don't really remember?
Okay, the cloud. They used the sheet metal for roofing of the old building, and it was either late July or early August, and Brother Bob Shiraki was still living here, but he was getting ready to move, and so he was helping Dan, and they were putting the sheet metal roof on it, 110 degree weather, and sheet metal up on the roof. So they'd go up and nail one down, go back down, dip themselves in a barrel of water, cool down, back up again. So it got so that it was just really, really bad. And so Dan says, well, let's pray. So they prayed and asked God to relieve the heat so they could finish that roof. And when they climbed back up the ladder to get on the roof, a cloud formed over the building, and it stayed there the rest of the time that they were, till they got all the sheet metal roof on and got. So a lot of that happened. A lot of little incidentals. Getting our well. And a lot of people don't know all the little things that happened on the way, how God provided. God showed Dan, okay, this is where I want your church. This is where I want your house. Now, our house was right there where the trailer is. So when he's ready to do the well, this is where your well's supposed to be. And Dan did the house the way so that the well could be right there in that little cubby place. So he hired the guy to come and drill the well. And the guy with his stick, he's going around. He said, "You want your well here?" Dan said, No, I want the well over here. And Dan wouldn't let him drill the well where he wanted to drill it. He had to drill it over there. So when he drilled the well, it was a better well. He had more water, a better pressure. Everything was better than any well that he had done before. So God knew where the water was that we needed, more than he did. So they were ones that had said when they were putting the roof on, what kind of religion do you have that you have to put the roof on right now? Why can't you wait till winter? Well, we didn't want to wait because Dan had help to do it, and we were in a hurry to get in the building. So he does the same thing with the well. He says, "I guess I know what kind of a God you're serving. You have to put the roof on in August, and you have to have the well right here, So that's how God worked with us, though. Even little simple things like getting a telephone. I mean, who moving anywhere dreams, are we going to be able to get a phone? And I mean, this was back. There was no cell phones or anything. I mean, it was just the old phone. But they wanted thousands of dollars to run phone lines out here. And we didn't have thousands of dollars to put a phone in. And yet we were going to need a phone. And so Dan was walking with somebody. I don't know if they were looking for... I don't know why they were where they were, but anyway, he was with another man, and they went to this place, and there was an old telephone line there, which was like down by the river, somewhere down by the river. So it wasn't very far. An old telephone line that they're not using anymore was right there, ready for us. Didn't cost us anything to get it run into our house.
So God figured out all the details.
Yeah, things like that. It was always, like I said, we didn't have to worry about. That wasn't something that we stressed over, because God was preparing the way for us. We just have to put forth the effort. He puts forth, if this is your desire to do the work, He'll provide for you. But it might not. You might get down to your last loaf of bread. Or maybe you got your pay, and this is your last pay. When are you going to get another pay? You lose a job, or this is your last pay. When you get to the very end, and then he sees that you're sincere and you're earnest in what you're doing. Dan, while he's here, he went to college and became a judge. They needed a judge.
He does it every job, basically.
He was. I don't think there was a job that he tried that he didn't succeed in. I mean, he succeeded in everything because he put God first in whatever he did. The chairman, he said, "Brother Dan, we've got a grant that we need to get approved. We have to have it approved in 13 days or we lose the grant." And Dan says, "Well, I never wrote a grant, but I'll see what I can do." So he prayed, did what he could with the grant. It got approved. So getting approved meant they had to have somebody to be a judge. So they didn't have anybody. So Dan went to college, ASU, U of A. Back and forth. He worked here, did what he had to do, helped with the tribe, did all this stuff. He had to go to Reno, Nevada to go to Judges College. So he went over there. He went to Washington and got approved in Washington, got everything that he needed to be a juvenile judge. Come back here as a juvenile judge, set up the court system, set up, they had a housing for kids. They had the boys on one side and the girls on the other. They fixed it up for a building. They had a cook that came and cooked, and caretakers that took care of them. If the parents were in jail or whatever, they could the kids were taken care of.
So you guys impacted the community too, like you said. You were meeting the needs of people. As you met,
meeting the needs of the people. So, but then he said, "Okay, I can't be the judge because I'm a minister here," and so the two jobs are conflict of interest.
Right.
So he trained another man to be the judge. Well, that man was judge for 25 years here.
Wow.
So
cool.
So was Brother Dan known as Brother Judge Dan?
Judge Brother Dan. That's funny.
So, yeah.
Well, do you remember some kind of experience about fire on the property? Like someone had a vision?
Yeah, a lady across the street. She was sitting on her porch, and she saw balls of fire come down out of heaven and roll all across this property and then roll back up into the sky. And so she came over. Dan was doing the footer, and he was down, doing on his knees down here doing this stuff. And he saw this. Back then, all the women wore the long camp dresses, the long skirts. And he saw this lady come over there, and so he looked up at her, and she says, "Are you the pastor here?" And he says, "Yes, I am." So he stood up, and she says, "I go to the Lutheran church," and she says, "We hear about experiences and stuff." She says, "But I've never had one." But she said, "I saw balls of fire come out of heaven and roll all across this property and then go back up in the heavens." And she says, that was a special blessing.
Wow.
And I thought I should tell you.
Mm-hmm.
That's so
cool. She told, so the ground was purified.
Check out part 3 next week to hear more awesome memories, along with Sister D's reflections on the highs and lows of her lifetime in service to God.